This coming week, people all across mainland China celebrate Duanwu, a holiday known here in the West as Dragon Boat Festival. They eat zongzi, little pyramid-shaped snacks made of glutinous rice, stuffed with something sweet or savory and wrapped in bamboo leaves. But the origin of this holiday is a little bit darker than the tasty food might lead you to believe. Last week, we looked at Questions of Heaven, a poem that seems to be one royal advisor's expression of frustration at his king, who appeared intent on sabotaging both himself and the nation he was supposed to be ruling. This week, we hear the rest of that story, the widely held origin of the holiday, and of the traditional snack, zongzi. Join me, Jaer Christie, as I explore the hidden legends that shape the world on The Mythographist, Myths of Mainland China. Yuan's last poem. Yuan sits on the bank of the Yangtze River, beneath a willow tree. The sky is clear and blue, and the rising sun of the early morning sparkles on the waters. He dips his brush in ink and lets it dance across the blank scroll before him. When he looks up again, a red dusk is rising fast. His poem has not blossomed the way he had hoped, but there will always be another day. He sighs and gathers his brush, his ink, his scroll, his chair, and walks the path to home. At his door, a royal messenger awaits. "Minister," says the young man, "our emperor, the king of Chu, sends word of our nation's new alliance. Next week, we shall entertain the emissaries of Qin here in our great city Ying, for we have signed a pact of peace with them." Yuan feels his face redden and his lips tighten. "Wait for only a moment, I pray," he says to the messenger, "for I have a letter of congratulations to send to our emperor." He draws forth his brush again and swiftly on a clean page writes, "My emperor seeks to make peace and increase his allies, but Qin is a hungry snake with venom dripping from its fangs. To bring it close is to invite its bite." He folds the paper and lights a candle and drips the wax upon the fold and presses his stone seal down upon it. Then Yuan hands it to the messenger and smiles. "His Majesty will not be surprised by my courtesy," he says. This he knows, for many times he has offered the same wisdom to the court. This he knows too, that his words will fall on the ears of the proud and assured, and that his words have sealed his own fate. Indeed, the very next day the emperor brings Yuan before him. "Lowly minister," the emperor says, "again and again you denounce our allies, our friends, the Qin. Perhaps you are full of ambition and seek to make a name for yourself. Perhaps you are jealous of the wisdom my trusted advisors dispense and think yourself wiser than they." Yuan kneels respectfully. "I look only upon the Qin's actions and learn from what they do, rather than trusting their sweet words," he responds. "To whom else have they said the same as to us? To the houses of Han and Zhao, who now lie crushed beneath the dominion of the armies of Qin?" "I will hear no more of this insolence," the emperor says. "I give you a choice, for I am just and not cruel. You may leave this city and live as a traitor, or you may remain here and die as one." "The emperor's justice cannot be questioned," Yuan concedes. "I pray that his wisdom holds the same merit." And so the minister-poet departs Ying, preserving his life but nothing more. From Ying he journeys all across the kingdom of Chu, listening to the tales and legends from old and young, and writing them down. And when he has heard all he can hear, he returns to his hometown, a small village beside the Miluo River. Here, Yuan watches himself become older. He sees his reflection in the well grow more weary and gaunt with every bit of news that comes from the capital. Corruption spreads, and those who wronged him long ago have found others to wrong. The people of his village delight in him. They read his poems and listen to his stories, tales of the splendor of the royal palace and the might of the Chu army. But though he paints amazing pictures with his words, still in his heart, Chu Yuan knows that the days of his nation are numbered. Finally, the day comes when a royal messenger arrives on horseback. "Our great emperor has declared that his court shall move," the messenger declares breathlessly to the crowd that gathers at the center of the village. "Further messengers will send word of the new city, for the emperor listens to delegates from across the kingdom." "Is this truly the news?" asks Chu Yuan, and the crowd murmurs. "Or only what the emperor wishes his people to think?" The messenger wavers. "This is the news from Ying, that the emperor moves." Chu Yuan shakes his head. "Do not deny the truth, my son," he says. "Is it not true that the armies of Qin have finally come for our capital city?" "I must ride on," the messenger says at last, and he turns his horse down the road. As night falls, Chu Yuan sits at his desk and writes a poem. It is a sad song, one of all the things his country has lost, of all the things he knows it will never regain, of all the virtues ignored by the greedy and integrity spat upon by the wicked. It is his lament for his life and for the life of his nation. Only when the poem is finished does Chu Yuan pick up the largest stone his now bony arms can carry. Only when the poem is finished does he walk slowly down to the water of the Miluo River. And only when the stone drags him down to the muddy riverbed is the poem finally finished. When the people of the village realize what has happened, they are too late to stop the old poet. It is the 5th day of the 5th month. "We must do what we can for his body, that his spirit may rest," say the women of the village. "We shall find his body and give him a memorial," say the men. So they push their boats out and paddle and dive and search for the body of their beloved poet. Hours pass, and as the sun sets, the fish come out. "They will find his body before we do," says one man in disgust. What a wretched thing to happen to him. So the women set about cooking rice. They make it sweet and sticky with dates, and they shape it into little pyramids, and they wrap it up in the long leaves of the bamboo that shoots up from beside the roads and between the houses, so as to entice the fish. Then the men take these little zongzi out on their boats, and they cast them into the water. "Here, fish," they say, "let these keep your mouths busy. Do not disturb Chu Yuan, for still he serves our nation." And every year, on the 5th day of the 5th month, we make zongzi, glutinous rice pyramids wrapped in bamboo leaves. We do this to remember the good man who loved his country, and the people who loved him for his service. It may seem great to be the king. What you say goes, and if someone makes you mad, you can make them dead. You got the power, and so everyone's trying to be super nice to you. But believe it or not, the threat of disgrace, exile, or execution can have something of a chilling effect on the quality of advice you get. Who's going to tell you that you're wrong? If your advisors are spending most of their time trying to make you happy, they're not going to tell you the things that you don't want to hear, even when you really need to hear them. This largely historical story is the most commonly held origin of Duanwu, which means double 5, since it falls on the 5th day of the 5th month of the lunar calendar. This year, 2023, that happens to be June 22nd in the Western calendar. There are a number of other historical possibilities for the origins of Duanwu and zongzi, but everyone I talked to told me this one. My one disappointment with this holiday was that there were way fewer dragon boats than I'd hoped for. The politician-poet Yuan is a historical figure who wrote, or at least collected, Chuse, an anthology of poems from around the kingdom of Chu. The last poem described in today's story is Li Sao, commonly translated as The Lament, and it's ascribed to him or someone who knew him well. The Lament seems to be an autobiography, telling the poet's own story and his disappointment at the way his nation went. These, of course, were the thoughts that got him exiled, and that turned out to be exactly right, as Chu was subsumed by the Qin dynasty in short order. The Qin dynasty is an interesting topic. On one hand, it's lauded as the great unifier of China and the birth of the modern nation. That's true in the sense that, from that time forward, there was pretty much just one major power governing the lands, but the family, location, and even nationality of that major power changed pretty frequently. On the other hand, the Qin dynasty is also readily acknowledged as being unnecessarily cruel and violent in its conquests. The first Qin emperor, the one who took over Chu in this story, is the same guy who had an entire city constructed just for his tomb, and then had everyone who built it killed and buried with him at a site that remained hidden for 2,000 years, alongside an army of terracotta warriors outside present-day Xi'an. We'll look at least one more folktale in the coming weeks that bears testament to Qin's legacy. When I went to China, I'd never had anything like zongzi, and their texture in particular was a bit of a surprise. But they're quite good, and are pretty filling too. Definitely best if you eat them while they're hot. If you enjoy widening your food horizons, I'd definitely recommend trying them if you ever get the opportunity. Today, this story is universally known in China. Although its significance isn't perhaps at the forefront of anybody's mind on Duanwu, the holiday itself is still held as a reminder of the importance of an uncompromising love for one's nation, no matter what that might cost. Thanks so much for listening. This episode of The Mythographist was written, narrated, and produced by me, Jaer Christie, with research by myself and Elena Tung, and music by Xiaoqing Luna Li, and from the compilation The Essence of Famous Chinese Folk Music. If you liked this episode, stick around, because there's lots more where this came from. Subscribe to get notified automatically when The Mythographist updates, and be sure to check out the rest of the episodes on your favorite podcast platform, or on YouTube. Finally, if there's a story that you grew up with that has shaped the way you see the world, I'd love to hear it. We all have so many stories to tell, and the more we hear, the more we'll understand each other, because we can't learn if we don't listen. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next time on The Mythographist. Ocho, what you doing? Are you gonna record? Good boy.